In a small, quiet town surrounded by endless fields of golden wheat and lush green pastures, there lived a young boy named Ethan Carter. Ethan was the son of Margaret and Robert Carter, two hard-working farmers who spent their days tending to crops, raising livestock, and ensuring their family had enough to eat. Life on the farm wasn't easy, but it was honest work, and the Carters took pride in what they did. They might not have had much money, but they were rich in love, values, and a deep connection to the land. Ethan was different from most kids his age. While other children played video games or hung out at the local diner after school, Ethan preferred spending time with books. He loved learning new things and dreamed of one day leaving the farm to explore the world beyond the fields. His parents encouraged him, often saying, "Education is your ticket to a better life." But even though they believed in him, they couldn't afford fancy schools or expensive tutoring. Instead, they saved every penny they could to send Ethan to Ridgewood High School, a well-regarded public school in a nearby town. Ridgewood High wasn't like the tiny rural schools Ethan might have attended otherwise. It was bigger, more competitive, and filled with students from wealthier families. Many of them drove expensive cars, wore designer clothes, and talked about vacations in faraway places. Ethan, on the other hand, arrived each day in the same old truck his father used for hauling hay. His jeans were faded, his shoes scuffed, and his backpack patched up with duct tape. At first, Ethan tried to blend in. He kept his head down, worked hard, and stayed out of trouble. And it paid off. His grades were among the best in his class. Teachers praised him for his sharp mind and determination. But no matter how well he performed academically, some of the students never let him forget where he came from. They teased him relentlessly, calling him farmer boy and making fun of his worn-out clothes. Ethan ignored them as best he could, focusing instead on his studies and dreaming of the future. One person who made Ethan's life particularly difficult was Brandon Reed, the richest and most popular boy in school. Brandon came from a family that owned half the businesses in town, and he carried himself like he ruled the place. He strutted through the hallways with an air of superiority, always surrounded by friends who laughed at his jokes no matter how cruel. To Brandon, Ethan was nothing more than a poor kid who didn't belong at Ridgewood. He went out of his way to make Ethan feel small, mocking him in front of others and spreading rumors about him. Despite the bullying, Ethan refused to let Brandon break him. He reminded himself daily why he was working so hard, to prove to himself and his parents that their sacrifices weren't in vain. Still, it wasn't easy. Every insult stung, every laugh hurt, and every snide comment chipped away at his confidence. But Ethan held on, believing that someday all his hard work would pay off. Then, one fateful afternoon, everything changed. It started during lunch when Brandon cornered Ethan near the lockers. With his usual smirk, Brandon began taunting him, again, this time louder than usual so everyone nearby could hear. "Hey, farmer boy," he sneered. "How's your daddy's tractor doing? Still stuck in the mud?" The crowd around them chuckled, but Ethan clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. Brandon continued, growing bolder with each passing second. "You don't even deserve to be here, you know that? This school's too good for trash like you." That was the final straw. Ethan snapped. Before he knew what he was doing, he shoved Brandon hard, sending him stumbling backward into the lockers. The hallway fell silent as everyone stared, shocked by what had just happened. Principal Thompson arrived moments later, summoned by a teacher who witnessed the commotion. Without asking questions or listening to Ethan's side of the story, the principal declared that violence wouldn't be tolerated at Ridgewood High. Ignoring Ethan's protests and pleas, Principal Thompson handed down the harshest punishment possible: expulsion. Just like that, Ethan's dreams of finishing high school and going to college seemed to vanish. As Ethan left the school that day, his heart felt heavier than ever. He walked slowly back to the old truck parked outside, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. How could this happen? All he'd wanted was to make his parents proud and create a better life for himself. Now, thanks to one moment of anger, everything he'd worked for was slipping through his fingers. Tears welled up in his eyes as he climbed into the truck and started the long drive home. When he finally pulled into the driveway of the farmhouse, his mother Margaret was waiting for him on the porch. She could tell something was wrong the moment she saw his face. Rushing over, she hugged him tightly and asked what had happened. Through choked sobs, Ethan told her everything: the bullying, the fight, the expulsion. Margaret listened silently, her own heart breaking for her son. When he finished, she wiped away his tears and said softly, "We'll figure this out together, Ethan. I promise." But deep down, Ethan wasn't sure if figuring it out was even possible. What kind of future awaited a boy expelled from high school? Could he really overcome something like this? As night fell, Ethan lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondering if things would ever get better. Little did he know, the next morning would bring something completely unexpected, something that would change his life forever. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Ethan stepped outside, his thoughts still heavy with worry. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-kissed grass and freshly turned soil. It was a smell that usually brought him comfort, reminding him of the simple joys of life on the farm. But today, even the familiar sights and sounds of home couldn't lift the weight from his shoulders. He sat on the porch steps, staring blankly at the field stretching out before him, wondering how he could possibly face the future now. Margaret and Robert Carter noticed their son's despair, but didn't push him to talk. They knew Ethan needed time to process what had happened. Instead, they busied themselves with chores around the farm, keeping an eye on him while giving him space. Margaret baked a batch of her famous apple pie, hoping the warm aroma might coax a smile onto Ethan's face. Robert tinkered with the tractor, humming softly as he worked. Life on the farm went on, steady and predictable, just as it always had. But for Ethan, nothing felt normal anymore. As the morning wore on, a strange sound began to fill the air, a rhythmic thumping noise that grew louder with each passing second. At first, Ethan thought it might be thunder, though the sky was clear and blue. Then he realized it wasn't coming from above. It was closer, almost like something massive moving through the air. Curious, he stood up and looked toward the horizon. What he saw next made his jaw drop in disbelief. A sleek black helicopter descended gracefully into the open field near the farmhouse, its rotors slicing through the air with a powerful whoosh. Dust swirled around as the machine touched down, kicking up clouds that danced in the sunlight. Ethan froze, unsure of what to do. Who could this be? Why would a helicopter land on their property? His parents hurried over, equally surprised by the unexpected visitor. The door of the helicopter opened and a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out. He wore an expensive suit, shiny leather shoes, and sunglasses that glinted in the morning light. Behind him followed two assistants, both holding tablets and folders. The man moved with confidence, surveying the area before turning his attention to the Carters. Removing his sunglasses, he offered a polite smile and introduced himself. "Good morning," he said in a deep, authoritative voice. "My name is Alexander Hartwell. I'm here to discuss some business regarding your land." Ethan stared at the man, trying to make sense of the situation. Alexander Hartwell was a name he'd heard before, in newspapers, on TV, and even in conversations among townsfolk. Hartwell was a billionaire entrepreneur, the founder of a global tech company that had recently expanded into agricultural investments. Rumors had been swirling for weeks that he was buying up farms in the region, but no one expected him to show up personally, let alone arrive in a helicopter. Robert shook Hartwell's hand firmly, introducing himself and his family. "Welcome to our farm, Mr. Hartwell," he said, gesturing to the fields around them. "What brings you here?" Hartwell explained that his company was interested in acquiring part of the Carters' farmland to build a state-of-the-art agricultural research facility. He spoke passionately about innovation, sustainability, and creating opportunities for local farmers. While Robert listened intently, nodding along, Ethan hung back, feeling out of place. This kind of conversation was far removed from anything he'd ever experienced. After discussing the details of the proposal, Hartwell paused and glanced at Ethan. Something about the young man caught his attention, the quiet intensity in his eyes, perhaps, or the way he carried himself despite clearly being weighed down by something. Sensing there was more to the story, Hartwell asked casually, "And who is this young man?" "This is our son, Ethan," Margaret replied proudly. "He's a bright boy, top of his class, or at least he was until—" Her voice trailed off, and she exchanged a glance with Robert. Hartwell raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Until what?" Reluctantly, Ethan recounted the events of the previous day, the bullying, the fight, the expulsion. As he spoke, Hartwell's expression shifted, from curiosity to concern. When Ethan finished, Hartwell nodded thoughtfully, his sharp mind already piecing things together. "I see," he said slowly. Then, after a moment of silence, he added, "You know, I've been in your shoes before, Ethan." Ethan blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" Hartwell smiled faintly, his tone softening. "When I was your age, I was expelled from school too. Not because I did anything wrong. I stood up for myself against someone who thought they were better than me. Back then, people didn't believe in second chances. But look where I am now." He gestured to the helicopter behind him, then to the vast expanse of land surrounding them. "Sometimes, it takes someone willing to stand up for you to turn things around." Ethan wasn't sure what to say. Here was one of the most successful men in the world, standing in front of him, saying he understood what it felt like to be judged unfairly. It was hard to wrap his head around. Hartwell continued, his voice firm yet kind. "I believe in potential, Ethan, and I see a lot of it in you. You're smart, determined, and you've got grit, qualities that can take you far if given the right opportunities. Let me help you." Ethan hesitated, unsure of whether to trust this stranger. Accepting help from someone like Hartwell seemed too good to be true, but his parents encouraged him, sensing this might be the break they'd prayed for. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder while Robert gave him a nod of approval. "What do you have in mind?" Ethan finally asked, his voice tentative. Hartwell's smile widened. "First, we'll deal with that principle of yours. No one should get away with treating a student so unjustly. After that, we'll figure out how to get you back on track. Education is important, and I won't let anyone stand in the way of your future, not even a biased principal." Ethan felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. For the first time since the expulsion, he dared to imagine that maybe, just maybe, things could work out after all. As Hartwell climbed back into his helicopter later that morning, he promised to return soon with a plan. The Carters watched as the chopper lifted off, its blades cutting through the air with precision. Once it disappeared into the distance, Ethan turned to his parents, a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside him. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Robert clapped him on the back. "Now, we wait, and trust that things are about to change." Margaret wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together, Ethan, just like we always do." For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to feel hopeful. Little did he know, the events set in motion by Hartwell's visit would not only transform his life, but also challenge the very foundations of Ridgewood High School and the people who ran it. The next morning, the small town buzzed with excitement and disbelief. News of Alexander Hartwell's visit to the Carter farm had spread like wildfire, thanks to a few curious neighbors who had witnessed the helicopter landing. By the time Ethan arrived at school, escorted by Hartwell himself in a sleek black car, the entire student body was abuzz. Whispers filled the hallways as students craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the billionaire walking confidently toward the administration office. Even the teachers seemed flustered, unsure of what to expect from this unexpected turn of events. Principal Thompson was no exception. When his secretary informed him that Alexander Hartwell had requested an urgent meeting, Thompson nearly choked on his coffee. He had heard of Hartwell, of course, everyone had. The billionaire's name was synonymous with success, innovation, and influence. But why would someone like Hartwell come to Ridgewood High? And why now? As he straightened his tie and adjusted his glasses, Thompson tried to compose himself, though his hands trembled slightly as he opened the door to greet his visitor. Hartwell wasted no time with pleasantries. With Ethan standing quietly beside him, Hartwell launched into a calm but firm explanation of why they were there. "Principal Thompson," he began, his voice steady and commanding, I understand you recently expelled this young man. He gestured toward Ethan. For what? You deemed violent behavior. I'm here to discuss the matter further. Thompson paled but managed to stammer out a response. Mr. Hartwell, I assure you that our disciplinary actions are always handled fairly and according to school policy. Fairly? Hartwell interrupted, raising an eyebrow. His tone remained polite, but there was an edge to it that made Thompson shrink back slightly. Let me stop you right there. From what I've gathered, your decision wasn't based on fairness, it was influenced by bias, am I correct? Thompson hesitated, glancing nervously at Ethan before replying. Well, Mr. Hartwell, there was an altercation involving another student. Violence of any kind cannot be tolerated in our school environment. And yet, Hartwell countered smoothly, you didn't bother to investigate the circumstances surrounding the incident. You didn't speak to witnesses or give Ethan a chance to explain his side of the story. Instead, you jumped to conclusions and punished him without evidence. Thompson opened his mouth to protest, but Hartwell held up a hand, silencing him. Let's not pretend this is about maintaining order. This is about favoritism. I know for a fact that Brandon Reed's father has been a generous donor to this school over the years. Is it a coincidence that Ethan, a scholarship student from a modest background, was expelled while Brandon faced no consequences whatsoever? The room fell silent. Thompson's face turned red, whether from anger or embarrassment, it was hard to tell. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding eye contact with both Hartwell and Ethan. For a moment it seemed as though he might deny the accusation, but then he sighed heavily and slumped forward. Look, Mr. Hartwell, he admitted reluctantly, Brandon's family does contribute significantly to the school. We try to keep them happy. But that doesn't mean we don't care about all our students. Hartwell leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto Thompson's. If that's true, then prove it. Then, reverse Ethan's expulsion immediately. Allow him to return to class and continue his education without prejudice. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. And trust me, Principal Thompson, you don't want that. Thompson swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He knew Hartwell wasn't bluffing. A lawsuit brought by someone of Hartwell's stature could destroy the school's reputation and possibly end Thompson's career. After a long pause, he nodded weakly. Very well. I'll reinstate Ethan's enrollment effective immediately. There will be no record of the expulsion on his transcript. Ethan exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. For weeks he'd felt powerless, trapped in a situation that seemed impossible to escape. Now, thanks to Hartwell, he had a second chance. But the billionaire wasn't done yet. There's one more thing, Hartwell said, his voice colder. Now, you'll issue a formal apology to Ethan, not just privately but publicly. During tomorrow's assembly, you'll address the entire student body and admit that your initial decision was unjust. You'll also announce new measures to ensure that every student, regardless of their background, is treated equally moving forward. Thompson looked horrified at the idea of admitting fault in front of the entire school. Surely that isn't necessary. It absolutely is, Hartwell interrupted firmly. This isn't just about Ethan. It's about setting an example for everyone here. If you're serious about running a fair and inclusive institution, then transparency is key. Realizing he had no other option, Thompson reluctantly agreed. With the matter settled, Hartwell rose from his seat, shaking hands with Ethan and offering him a reassuring smile. You've got a bright future ahead of you, Ethan. Don't let anyone dim your light. As they left the office, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions, gratitude, pride, and even a little vindication. For so long he'd been made to feel inferior because of where he came from. Now, thanks to Hartwell, he had proven that he deserved respect and fairness just like anyone else. Word of the meeting quickly spread throughout the school. By lunchtime, students were talking about nothing else. Some were impressed by Ethan's courage and resilience. Others were envious of his newfound connection to a billionaire. Even the teachers seemed to treat him differently, nodding approvingly as he walked past. For the first time, Ethan felt like he truly belonged at Ridgewood. Hours later that afternoon, Hartwell invited Ethan and his parents to dinner at a nearby restaurant. Over plates of steak and roasted vegetables, he outlined a plan to support Ethan's education beyond simply reversing the expulsion. "I want to transfer you to Oak Ridge Academy," Hartwell explained. "It's one of the best private schools in the state, and I believe it will provide you with the resources and opportunities you need to thrive." Ethan's eyes widened. Oak Ridge Academy was known for its rigorous academics, state-of-the-art facilities, and connections to top universities. Attending such a prestigious institution had always felt like an unattainable dream. "But how can we afford it?" he asked hesitantly. Hartwell waved away the concern. "Don't worry about the cost. I'll cover your tuition through a scholarship fund I've established specifically for students like you, talented individuals who deserve a chance to succeed but lack the means to do so. All I ask is that you work hard and make the most of this opportunity." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes as she reached across the table to shake Hartwell's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given us hope when we thought all was lost." Robert nodded solemnly, his own gratitude evident. "We won't forget this kindness, Mr. Hartwell. Ever." Ethan sat quietly, overwhelmed by the generosity and belief Hartwell had shown him. For so long he'd doubted himself, wondering if he was good enough to achieve his dreams. Now, with Hartwell's support, those doubts began to fade. He realized that sometimes all it took was one person believing in you to change everything. Before leaving, Hartwell handed Ethan a business card. "Call me anytime you need advice or guidance," he said warmly. "And remember, this is just the beginning. The world is full of possibilities. You just have to seize them." As the Carters drove home that evening, Ethan stared out the window, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to dream big, to imagine a future where he could rise above his circumstances and make a real difference in the world. Thanks to Alexander Hartwell, that future no longer felt out of reach. The following morning, Ridgewood High School buzzed with anticipation. Students gathered in the gymnasium for the weekly assembly, their usual chatter replaced by hushed whispers and excited speculation. News of Principal Thompson's public apology had spread like wildfire, and everyone wanted to see how the man who had ruled the school with an iron fist would handle the situation. Some students were gleeful at the thought of seeing him humbled. Others felt uneasy, unsure of what this meant for the school's future. Ethan sat quietly near the front of the crowded room, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He wasn't looking forward to being the center of attention, but Hartwell had insisted it was necessary, not just for Ethan's sake, but for the entire student body. "This is about accountability," Hartwell had explained the night before. "If people see that even someone in power can admit when they're wrong, it sets a powerful example." As the clock struck 9, Principal Thompson stepped onto the stage, his usual confident stride replaced by hesitant, almost reluctant steps. His face was pale, and he avoided making eye contact with the audience. The murmurs grew louder as he adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he began to speak. "Good morning, students and faculty," Thompson said, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Today I stand before you to address a serious matter regarding one of our own, Ethan Carter." He paused, glancing briefly in Ethan's direction before continuing. "Recently, I made a decision that was deeply unfair. In response to an altercation involving Ethan and another student, I chose to expel him without fully investigating the circumstances or considering his side of the story. This was a mistake, a failure on my part to uphold the values of fairness and integrity that this school claims to represent." The room fell silent, the weight of Thompson's words sinking in. Even the teachers, who had long been accustomed to his authoritarian leadership style, looked stunned. For years, Thompson had prided himself on maintaining strict discipline, often dismissing complaints about favoritism or bias. Now, here he was, admitting fault in front of everyone. "I also failed to recognize the influence that external pressures may have had on my decision," Thompson continued, his tone growing heavier with each sentence. "It has come to light that certain actions taken by members of our community, in particular influential families, may have unduly affected how this incident was handled. This is unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for allowing it to happen. By now, many students were openly staring at Brandon Reed, who sat slumped in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His father's donations to the school had been an open secret for years, and while most people hadn't questioned it before, today's revelation cast those contributions in a new, troubling light. Brandon shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny, his usual bravado nowhere to be seen. Thompson concluded his speech by announcing several changes aimed at ensuring greater transparency and equality within the school. These included the formation of a student advisory board to provide feedback on disciplinary decisions, mandatory training for staff on recognizing and addressing bias, and clearer guidelines for handling conflicts between students. When he finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Not the polite clapping reserved for routine announcements, but a thunderous ovation that echoed through the gymnasium. Ethan felt a mix of emotions as he listened to the cheers. Relief, pride, and gratitude washed over him, but there was also a lingering sense of unease. While he was glad justice had been served, he couldn't help but wonder if things would really change, or if this was just a temporary fix designed to placate Hartwell and save face. Still, he knew better than to dwell on negativity. For now, he chose to focus on the positives. He had been vindicated, and the school had taken its first steps toward becoming a fairer place. Later that day, news of the assembly spread beyond the walls of Ridgewood High. Local reporters descended upon the town, eager to document the dramatic turn of events. Cameras flashed as journalists interviewed students, teachers, and even Margaret and Robert Carter, who spoke proudly of their son's resilience. Hartwell, true to form, gave a brief statement praising Ethan's character and reiterating his commitment to supporting underprivileged youth. Every child deserves a chance to succeed, he told the press, and when systems fail them, it's our duty to step in and make things right. The media coverage only added to the whirlwind of attention surrounding Ethan. Classmates who had once mocked him now approached him with newfound respect, or in some cases, thinly veiled envy. Teachers went out of their way to offer encouragement, and even strangers in town greeted him warmly. It was overwhelming at times, but Ethan reminded himself that this was part of the journey. If sharing his story could inspire others to stand up against injustice, then it would all be worth it. Meanwhile, preparations for Ethan's transfer to Oak Ridge Academy were underway. Hartwell arranged for a meeting with the school's headmaster, Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, a sharp yet compassionate woman known for her dedication to nurturing young talent. During their conversation, she expressed admiration for Ethan's perseverance and assured him that he would thrive at Oak Ridge. "We believe in giving students the tools they need to unlock their potential," she said. "Based on everything Mr. Hartwell has told me, I have no doubt you'll excel here." Ethan toured the campus shortly afterward, marveling at its modern facilities and vibrant atmosphere. Unlike Ridgewood High, where cliques and hierarchies dominated, Oak Ridge seemed to foster a spirit of collaboration and inclusivity. Students greeted him warmly during his visit, offering tips on navigating the rigorous curriculum and balancing extracurricular activities. By the end of the day, Ethan felt more excited than nervous about starting fresh. Back home, life on the farm continued as usual, though the Carters found themselves adjusting to their sudden fame. Neighbors stopped by frequently, congratulating them on Ethan's achievements and expressing hope that his success might bring positive changes to the community. Margaret baked extra pies to share with visitors, while Robert joked that he might start charging admission to see the famous Carter farm. Despite the attention, the family remained grounded, focusing on supporting Ethan as he prepared for the next chapter of his life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood on the porch overlooking the fields. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. It was moments like these that reminded him of who he was and where he came from. No matter how far he traveled or how much he achieved, he would always carry a piece of the farm with him. Hartwell called later that night to check in, asking how Ethan was feeling about the transition. "It's a big step," Hartwell acknowledged, "but I know you're ready for it. Remember, This isn't just about leaving the past behind. It's about building a future that reflects your values and aspirations. Ethan nodded, even though Hartwell couldn't see him. "Thank you," he said softly. "For everything. You earned it," Hartwell replied firmly. "Now go show the world what you're capable of." As Ethan hung up the phone, he felt a surge of determination wash over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time he truly believed he could walk it. With the support of his family, the lessons he'd learned along the way, and the unwavering belief of someone who saw potential in him when few others did, Ethan knew he was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, with the echoes of applause still ringing in his ears and the promise of a brighter future stretching out before him, Ethan Carter took his first steps toward a new beginning, one that would test his limits, shape his character, and ultimately define the person he was destined to become. Life at Oak Ridge Academy was nothing short of transformative for Ethan. The school, nestled in a sprawling campus filled with lush green lawns, modern classrooms, and cutting-edge laboratories, felt like a world away from Ridgewood High. From the moment he stepped through its gates, Ethan sensed that this place operated on an entirely different wavelength, one where ambition was celebrated, curiosity was nurtured, and every student was encouraged to push their boundaries. His first few weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences. Classes moved at a faster pace than he was used to, and the curriculum challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. But Ethan thrived under pressure. He dove into his studies with relentless focus, poring over textbooks late into the night, and seeking help from teachers whenever he needed clarification. His classmates, many of whom came from privileged backgrounds, initially kept their distance, unsure of how to interact with someone so different from them. However, Ethan's quiet confidence and genuine kindness soon won them over. By the end of his first month, he had formed friendships with several students who admired his work ethic and humility. One person who played a particularly important role during this transition was Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, the headmaster of Oak Ridge. Unlike Principal Thompson, whose leadership often felt cold and impersonal, Dr. Monroe radiated warmth and encouragement. She took a personal interest in Ethan's progress, regularly checking in to see how he was adjusting to his new environment. During one of these meetings, she asked him about his long-term goals. "What do you want to achieve, Ethan?" she inquired, her sharp yet kind eyes studying him intently. Ethan hesitated before answering. For years, his dream had been simple: escape poverty and make his parents proud. But now, surrounded by opportunities he'd never imagined possible, he found himself rethinking his ambitions. "I think I want to combine my roots in farming with technology," he said slowly, piecing together his thoughts as he spoke. "There are so many problems facing agriculture today: climate change, food shortages, unsustainable practices. If I could find a way to use innovation to solve those issues, it would mean everything to me." Dr. Monroe smiled approvingly. "That's a noble goal, Ethan, and I believe you have the potential to make it happen. Let's explore some avenues that might help you get started." True to her word, Dr. Monroe introduced Ethan to a mentorship program designed to connect students with professionals in their fields of interest. Through this initiative, Ethan was paired with Alexander Hartwell, who agreed to guide him further in developing his ideas. Over weekends and holidays, Ethan traveled to Hartwell's headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city, to shadow him in meetings, brainstorm strategies, and learn the intricacies of entrepreneurship. Hartwell proved to be an invaluable teacher, sharing not only technical knowledge but also life lessons about perseverance, integrity, and leadership. "You're not just building a career, Ethan," Hartwell told him during one of their sessions. "You're creating a legacy. Every decision you make will shape the kind of impact you leave on the world. So think carefully about what matters most to you, and never compromise your values." Inspired by Hartwell's vision, Ethan began working on a project that combined his passion for agriculture with emerging technologies. Drawing inspiration from his childhood on the farm, he developed a prototype for a smart irrigation system that used artificial intelligence to monitor soil moisture levels and optimize water usage. The system promised to reduce waste while increasing crop yields, making it especially beneficial for small-scale farmers struggling with limited resources. When he presented his idea at Oak Ridge's annual science fair, it earned widespread acclaim, winning first prize and catching the attention of investors eager to support its development. Back home, life on the Carter farm continued much as it always had, though subtle changes hinted at the family's growing prominence. Local newspapers frequently featured stories about Ethan's achievements, portraying him as a symbol of hope for rural communities. Strangers stopped by the farm to congratulate Margaret and Robert, marveling at how far their son had come despite humble beginnings. Though the attention sometimes overwhelmed them, the Carters remained steadfast in their values, treating everyone with the same warmth and hospitality they always had. Margaret, ever the optimist, embraced the spotlight with grace, using it as an opportunity to advocate for other families like theirs. She joined a local community group focused on improving access to education in underserved areas, drawing inspiration from Ethan's journey. "If our boy can rise above all the challenges he faced," she often said, "then anyone can, if they're given the right chances." Robert, meanwhile, found himself reflecting on the broader implications of Ethan's success. "It makes you wonder," he mused one evening as the family gathered around the dinner table. "How many other kids out there are just as talented as Ethan but don't have someone like Mr. Hartwell to step in and help? We've got to figure out a way to level the playing field for everyone." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his mind already turning over possibilities. "Maybe that's something I can work on later," he suggested. "Once my irrigation system is up and running, I could look into creating scholarships or programs to support students from rural areas. People like me deserve a chance too." The idea resonated deeply with the entire family, solidifying their commitment to giving back once they were in a position to do so. For now, however, Ethan focused on finishing high school and preparing for college. With Hartwell's guidance, he applied to some of the country's most prestigious universities, confident that his hard work and innovative ideas would set him apart. When acceptance letters began arriving, each one brought a wave of excitement and a reminder of how far he'd come. But even as Ethan achieved milestone after milestone, he never lost sight of his roots. Whenever he returned home for breaks, he spent hours walking the fields, feeling the earth beneath his feet and breathing in the familiar scents of hay and fresh produce. These moments grounded him, reminding him of the sacrifices his parents had made and the values they had instilled in him. No matter how successful he became, he vowed never to forget where he came from, or the struggles that had shaped him. As graduation approached, Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. From the bullying and expulsion at Ridgewood High to the helicopter landing in his family's field, every twist and turn had led him closer to realizing his dreams. Along the way, he had learned invaluable lessons about resilience, justice, and the power of believing in oneself. More importantly, he had discovered that true success wasn't measured by wealth or accolades. It was defined by the positive impact one could have on others. On the day of his high school graduation, Ethan stood on stage in front of hundreds of cheering classmates, teachers, and guests. As he received his diploma, he glanced toward the audience, locking eyes with his parents, who beamed with pride. Nearby sat Alexander Hartwell, clapping enthusiastically, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. In that moment, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the people who had supported him, the obstacles that had tested him, and the opportunities that lay ahead. When the ceremony ended, Ethan joined his family outside, basking in the warm glow of accomplishment. Margaret hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. "You've done us all proud." Robert clapped him on the back, his voice thick with emotion. "This is just the beginning, son. You've got a whole world waiting for you." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with hope and determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. With his family by his side, his mentors guiding him, and his dreams within reach, he felt unstoppable. And so, as the sun set behind The hills casting golden light across the horizon, Ethan Carter stood poised to embark on the next chapter of his life. It was a chapter filled with promise, purpose, and endless possibilities, a testament to the power of perseverance, kindness, and second chances. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain: Ethan would seize it with both hands, determined to leave the world better than he had found it. Years passed, and Ethan Carter's journey transformed from a story of personal triumph into one of global impact. After graduating at the top of his class from Oak Ridge Academy, Ethan earned a full scholarship to Stanford University, where he pursued a degree in agricultural engineering. It was there that he refined his prototype for the smart irrigation system, turning it into a fully functional product capable of revolutionizing farming practices worldwide. By the time he graduated, his invention, dubbed AgriNova Tech, had garnered international attention, earning him awards, patents, and partnerships with organizations dedicated to sustainable agriculture. But Ethan didn't stop at creating innovative technology. True to his promise, he used his success as a platform to uplift others who faced the same struggles he once had. In collaboration with Alexander Hartwell, he established the Carter-Hartwell Foundation, an organization focused on providing scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources to underprivileged students from rural areas. The foundation's mission was simple yet profound: to ensure that no child would be denied opportunities because of their circumstances. Through this initiative, thousands of young people gained access to education and training they otherwise wouldn't have had, giving them the tools to break free from cycles of poverty. One of the foundation's flagship programs was the second, Chance Scholars Initiative, which specifically targeted students who had been expelled or labeled as at risk. Inspired by his own experience, Ethan designed the program to offer these students academic support, counseling, and career guidance. He believed deeply that everyone deserved a second chance and that many so-called troublemakers simply needed someone to believe in them. Over time, the program became a beacon of hope for countless families, proving that with the right support, even the most challenging situations could lead to extraordinary outcomes. As AgriNova Tech expanded, Ethan traveled extensively, visiting farms across continents to implement his irrigation systems and train local farmers in sustainable practices. From drought-stricken regions in Africa to flood-prone areas in Southeast Asia, his innovations helped communities overcome environmental challenges while improving food security. Farmers who had once struggled to make ends meet found new prosperity, thanks to Ethan's work, and stories of gratitude poured in from every corner of the globe. Yet despite his growing fame and wealth, Ethan remained grounded, always remembering the lessons he learned on his parents' farm. Margaret and Robert Carter watched their son's achievements with pride, though they never let go of their humble roots. They continued working the land, finding joy in the simple rhythms of farm life. However, they also embraced their role as ambassadors for the foundation, sharing their story at events and inspiring others to contribute to its cause. Margaret often said, "We may not have much, but we've always had love, and now we get to share that love with the world." Back in his hometown, Ridgewood High School underwent significant changes following Principal Thompson's resignation. Under new leadership, the school adopted policies aimed at fostering inclusivity and fairness. A memorial plaque was installed near the entrance, commemorating Ethan's courage and serving as a reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice. Students like Brandon Reed, whose actions had once fueled division, grew up to become advocates for equality, inspired by the example set by Ethan and Hartwell. For Alexander Hartwell, mentoring Ethan had been more than just an act of kindness. It had reignited his passion for making a difference. Though he had long been admired for his business acumen, Hartwell discovered a deeper sense of purpose through his involvement with the foundation. He often joked that Ethan had taught him as much as he had taught Ethan, reminding him of the value of humility, empathy, and perseverance. Their partnership blossomed into a lifelong friendship, built on mutual respect and shared goals. Despite his demanding schedule, Ethan made it a point to return home regularly, cherishing the quiet moments spent with his family. Sitting on the porch overlooking the fields, he reflected on how far he'd come and how much farther he still hoped to go. His dreams were no longer just about personal success. They were about leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. Whether through his inventions, his philanthropy, or the lives he touched along the way, Ethan knew he was planting seeds that would continue to grow long after he was gone. One evening, during a rare break from his travels, Ethan stood in the middle of the field where Hartwell's helicopter had landed all those years ago. The memory of that day still felt surreal, a pivotal moment that had changed everything. As he gazed at the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, he thought about the countless individuals whose lives had intersected with his own. His parents, who had sacrificed so much. Hartwell, who had believed in him when few others did. And the countless strangers whose stories had shaped his perspective. In that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Success wasn't measured by accolades or wealth, but by the connections we forge and the impact we leave behind. Every challenge he had faced, every setback he had overcome, had prepared him for this moment, for the opportunity to create a better future not just for himself, but for others. The next morning, Ethan received a letter from a young girl named Lily, a recipient of the Second Chance Scholars Program. In her note, she wrote about how Ethan's story had inspired her to keep fighting for her dreams, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. "You showed me that it doesn't matter where you start," she wrote. "What matters is where you're willing to go, and I'm ready to go far." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he read her words. He knew then that his journey was far from over. There were still battles to fight, injustices to address, and lives to change. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. With his family, his mentors, and an ever-growing community of supporters by his side, he was ready to take on whatever came next. And so, as the sun rose over the fields, casting golden light across the landscape, Ethan Carter stepped forward with renewed determination. He was no longer just the farmer's son who had been expelled from school. He was a visionary, a leader, and a symbol of resilience. His story served as a testament to the power of second chances, the strength of the human spirit, and the boundless possibilities that arise when we dare to dream big. Whatever the future held, Ethan vowed to face it with courage, compassion, and unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. For in the end, it wasn't the helicopters, the awards, or the headlines that defined him. It was the lives he touched and the hope he inspired. And that, he knew, was the greatest achievement of all.